Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with David Abernethy. Coach Abernethy has enjoyed nearly 25 years in the collegiate realm, playing and coaching for Methodist University, Western Carolina University, Clemson University, Ole Miss, Western Kentucky University, and Furman University. Abernethy is co-founder of Tsunami Barbell, a company dedicated to increasing the strength and performance outcomes of athletes nationwide. Besides his professional achievements, Abernethy pioneered the Speed Force Max training system and founded the Iron Disciples, a nonprofit initiative assisting young men in making wise life choices. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Man, this is great. I got to watch some of your stuff and kind of get ready for this thing, and you've got some wonderful stuff out there. And we talked pre-show a little, and then I heard you mention it on a few other podcasts, but I think we have this in common, and maybe we'll start there. But Iron Disciples, what started that, and how does that benefit some of the athletes you're working with?
Right. So this thing dates back all the way. Joey Batson, way back. Joey Batson, John Sisk was my strength coach at Western Carolina, and that's how I got to Clemson. So when we were at Clemson, we would have a group called a Power Hour, and it was all the freshman guys coming in that didn't play in the game. They would redshirt. And so it all stemmed from that. We'd spend 4 days a week training, and then on the fifth day, we'd do a competition to give them that competitive spirit because they weren't going to play on Saturdays. Well, fast forward, when I go to Furman, I want to change the name up a little bit, called Iron Disciples. And I just thought, man, what a great way we could help build men physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so we did the same thing, but what we added to it at Furman is we'd have Scott Schubert, FCA director, or somebody come give a spiritual talk. Adam Smotherman helped me start it at Furman, who's at Virginia now, the head strength coach at UVA football. And, man, it's just a great time to pour into guys. And even dated back to Western Kentucky, I had a guy there named Dan Klein, and they asked me to be the liaison for FCA. I don't know why, because I was not a great representative of FCA. I guess I was, but, you think of yourself, you're thinking, man, I'm a coach, and sometimes I use some strong language, and sometimes I say things I wish I wouldn't say, and man, God changed me anyway, and I was the liaison for our football team there. And, man, I gave the freshman group that year what I call Power Hour, which now I call Iron Disciples. I gave them a Bible. And then I'm at Clemson, fast forward 4 years down the road, and I'm sitting in, we're getting ready for a bowl game, and the head coach, David Elson, calls me and said, hey, Dan Klein, who went to the NFL, played at Western Kentucky, became the president of FCA at Western Kentucky, said, Coach Abernethy gave me a Bible my freshman year, and now I'm a Christian, and I'm leading FCA. And, man, that right there is like, and I knew then that I didn't do anything. I just gave him the word, and the word worked on him, and it was awesome. And so what I did from there on out, when I was at Clemson, all my senior guys, and at Furman, all my senior guys, I would get them a Bible, and I would get their name imprinted on the bottom of it, and I'd personally give it to them. Well, I've had a lot of those guys from Clemson and Furman reach out to me and say, Coach, still got my Bible, and they'll text me a picture of their Bible, and they'll send it to me that they've been reading it. Well, that also applies to your graduate assistants. Adam Smotherman, who's at Virginia now. We were at the beach this summer, and he had an old worn-out Bible that I'd given him back in 2011 at Clemson, and I got his name put on it, and he sent a picture of it. He looked worn out. He's been using it. He goes, hey, just thinking about you. Got my Bible here that you gave me, and just spending time with God and the Lord and growing, and I really appreciate it. So now, going into where I have Iron Disciples now is my nonprofit. A pastor asked me when I was coaching his son, who's in the rec league, said, hey, do you want to help me put on a crusade? I'm like, oh, man, what is that? And so it was a crusade to where, if you can imagine Billy Graham, and they got these stadiums. Well, they did it in a smaller form, and it's called a Go-Tell Crusade, and they want me to help raise money and awareness in the community. Well, I did that, and as we're working on it, man, it was tough. It was tough to get people involved, It it's tough to even get pastors behind the pews to come and help. I'm like, man, you guys are always asking us to help. Now we're asking you to help, and you don't want to help. So I became very frustrated with the church at that time. And I was praying, and it really grew my faith. It was a time that God took me through a little valley, but he brought me out on a mountaintop, and I'll tell you about it. It's a pretty cool story. So we go through that thing, and we're struggling. We had to raise about $130,000 to put it on, and we got about half of that. We go into the crusade. The crusade was a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we're about 60-some thousand dollars short. And I told the pastor, who also owns a business, he's a bivocational pastor, and he owns a machine shop. I said, hey, I'll go half with you. We'll just dip into our savings account, and we'll see this thing through. We committed to it. We'll see what God does. Well, we get to the end of it on Wednesday, and we're $7,500 to the good that people had gave. So what it tells me is when you step out in faith, God will move, but you got to move first. You got to meet him halfway. So that's a pretty cool story. And that's not the only part. Over 300 people gave their lives to Christ, which was awesome. And so got to be a part of that. Got to see athletes, students, older people that came with their kids and grandkids. I seen an 80-year-old man on the football field lay on his face crying, praying to God, which was awesome. I'm like, my gosh, what is this? It looked like a bomb out there where people just lay on the football field praying. Well, I was high. I had a spiritual high. I don't know if you ever had a spiritual high coming off that, man. You just kind of like, man, this is awesome. So I go to the CSCCA the following Monday. It's the first or second week of May. And we're there. It's on a Monday. I think we're in Orlando. And a guy calls me who I've been using this gym that I'm in right now. And we've been sharing it. I put the equipment in, and he had the building. It's a nice building. I mean, it's 3,200 square feet, brick and mortar, asphalt, driveway, stripe. I mean, it's in the city. It's nice. And he called me and said, hey, you want to use the building? Or he texted me first. He said, I need to talk to you. And he called me. And I called him. I stepped out of a meeting, and I called him. I said, hey, what's going on? He said, I want to know if you want to use the building. I said, yeah. Do you want me to buy it? You want me to rent it? What you want me to do? And his name is David Goff. Incredible man. And he kind of got emotional. He said, no, God told me to give it to you. And so he gave me this building. It's probably worth upwards closer to $1 million. It's a very nice building. So I said, okay, God, what do you want me to do? So I started praying about it. I said, you know what? I know what I can do right now. So I can invite kids in the community that can't afford to come, that don't maybe have a dad in their life or a man in their life, and I can be that role model for them. And so we'd bring them in and let them work out, and then we could do a little short devotion at the end. And right now we're training on Saturdays. And so the Iron Disciples Power Hour, that started a long time ago. We did it at Ole Miss. We did it at Clemson. We did it at Western Kentucky. We did it at Furman. Every time I go to a coaching clinic and I see players that are now coaches, they talk about that time, that developmental time. And so it's just basically time under tension. It's stress. God is the ultimate strength coach. He'll take us through tough times and valleys in our lives. He'll allow things to happen to strengthen us. We pray for strength. We pray for wisdom. We pray for financial blessing. He doesn't give it to you. He prepares you for it. Then he allows you to receive it, which I think is it's nowadays it's the microwave effect. Everybody wants it now, but if you can think back to good old days when your grandparents were cooking, they cooked on a stove top, almost like a crock pot style cooking of stews and meat and things like that. It just takes time. And so that's where it all came from. And it's just been a blessing just working with these young kids and watching them get stronger, for one, two, just putting a little bit of nugget in them every day. Just a little nugget they can take with them, teach them how to treat their mom and dad, teach them how to talk to their grandparents. Say, hey, man, you wake up in the morning, make up your bed. Try to do something good. Try to be disciplined. We had our last meeting this Saturday after the first football game, and my group will be from 12 years old to 18 to 20. I do have some college guys that come back, especially in the summertime when they want a place to train. And we talked about discipline, the discipline of preparation. We talked about how the military talks about, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your preparation, right? And so we talked about making good choices, making good decisions, and choices make people, and people make choices. So the choices people make determine their destiny. And we talked about it earlier. Faith requires you to have action too. We do wait on God, waiting for His direction, but we got to keep moving forward as we wait. It's almost like training. When you're in season, off season, there's a time you got the foot on the gas. There's a time you got your foot on the clutch. There's a time you got to hit the brakes. Well, that's how your faith is too. There's a time to slow up the gas, time to hit the clutch, and time to hit the brakes. When you hear God's direction, that's when you hit the brakes and change direction and go. So, sorry I'm talking you to death. I'm excited about this.
And I can tell, and I want to make sure that I give you plenty of room to talk about it. That was the whole thing with the podcast. It was way out of my comfort zone, and I felt like it was something we were being asked to start. So whenever anybody wants to come on and talk about their faith, we always try to make sure that there's enough room and time for them to talk about those things, because they're important to me. And I wouldn't have the guess I have if it wouldn't have been because of the idea to start this and the blessing that it has been in my life. So, but adding on to what you were saying, do we undervalue sometimes the role or influence that the strength coach has on the people that are in the facility?
Yeah, because everybody looks to game day. They don't understand that the people on the outside sometimes will think as the strength coach of a PE teacher. He's just trying to come in and you got this block right now and you're trying to fill up this block with exercises for an hour. They look at it as painting them, or whatever. So that's why I always try to explain to my guys everything that we did. Why are we doing this? How does it affect my skeletal muscular system? How does it affect my CNS? How does it affect my cardiovascular? How does it affect my, not wanting to give up, my tenacity? There's a lot of things. So a strength coach, if you think about it, if you've been in a college setting, and this could be in a high school setting, or it could be in a private setting, where do athletes always come back to? The hub, right? The hub is the weight room. That's the area where everybody comes back and they gravitate to, because that's where they have grinded, they have put time in, and they've been with a strength coach who has grinded with them, who's sweated with them, who's bled with them, and been outside and got sunburns and things together. You've been through the gamut with each other. And the strength coach has probably chewed them out, ripped them up, and spit them out. Coach Batson always told us, he said, when you coach a kid, you got to imagine him being a car battery. All right. So on a car battery, it's got the negative side, but it's got the positive side too. And without either one of them, it doesn't work. So you got to tell a kid the truth. But when you break him down, you better come back around and put that positive on him and pick him back up. And when you put your arm around a kid, you don't have to tell him you love him, but you can. And it's good if you do. But you put your arm around that kid, he feels the love, and he'll always come back to you. Always. So anybody that you can train you can train an idiot to go out there and blow a whistle and make somebody tired. But you got to have a purpose, and you got to let the athletes see your heart. You got to let them see your family. You got to let them see that you do things outside the weight room too. They want to see that you're human, that you're not just some crazy, drill sergeant in there trying to crush them all the time. Does that make sense?
It does. And I had a question in there that I wanted to kind of ask, and I lost it in my head there a little bit, but, do you find that, and this is it, I just remembered. So do you find that athletes get around so many people that tell them how amazing they are and how hardworking they are and all of these things that sometimes they crave the truth? Sometimes they crave a little bit of criticism.
Yes. Great ones want to be coached. Great ones want to be, if you're in business like I am now, I'm always looking to sharpen my axe, right? I'm always looking to, how can I sharpen my axe? Well, if you're a great athlete, you want to sharpen your axe. You know who really lets you coach them hard are female athletes. They really, and they take to what you say. Male athletes sometimes are a little bit arrogant because they're cursed with talent. So sometimes they just want to kind of get ahead of you and they don't want to be patient. But a female athlete, man, a lot those are some of the funnest to coach because they take you at your word and they trust you. And man, you just watch them grow, watch them blossom. So yes, I do think the great ones want to be criticized in a way to where it helps them grow. Not a beat down, but a sharpening of the axe. Abraham Lincoln said, and I use the axe analogy because Abraham Lincoln said, I got 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend 4 sharpening my axe. So then it goes back to discipline and preparation, right?
Through that, you've been able to enter rooms that most of us would never dream of. You had a chance to work with Eli Manning. You've spent time around the Harbaughs. You talked about Batson. Some of these people that have managed to come into your life, what are some of the best lessons you've learned from them?
Well, I mean, at the big schools, I've worked with first round draft picks at all those schools, at all the times I've been there. Great, phenomenal athletes. The difference in those guys, the first round draft pick guys, man, they're just different. They treat people different. When I say that in a positive way, Eli Manning, one thing I noticed about him when I went to Ole Miss, and I was only 24 years old when I went down there, and so I was still pretty young myself. And I watched how he treated everybody. And he was taught by his dad and his brother, so he was groomed to do this. But he treated everybody fairly. He treated everybody with respect, and that's what the great ones do. John Sisk was at Vanderbilt University. He was my strength coach at Western Carolina. He now works with me now at our company. When he was there, Eddie George, who played for the Titans. Remember Eddie George, the great running back? Man, just a phenomenal athlete. Phenomenal. I'd watch him run out there. And you ever seen athletes that kind of cumbersome and labor when they run? It's boom, boom, boom. I watch him run on that turf as this. It sounds like a whiff every time he ran. It's just unbelievable. Well, when I was in West Kentucky, Coach Sisk, had an extra Austin leg drop machine. It's a machine that linemen use to work on a dry phase when they're coming out of their stance. And so I'd raised a little money and I bought it from him. Well, I'd go down there to load up that machine in the back of my truck. We had to break it down. You know who helped me load that machine up? Eddie George. He didn't have to do that. I mean, this guy was a multi-millionaire, big-time running back at Ohio State and in the NFL. But Eddie George said, hey, you want me to help you, coach? You want me to help you load that up? And that right there just told me, and I would always tell that story to my athletes everywhere I went. I'm like, guys, if you humble yourself, you'll be exalted. If you exalt yourself, you'll be humbled. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, it's got a lot of truth in it. It's got just some basic life lessons. If you'll take the wisdom from it, whether you're a Christian or not, you can use those to better your business, better your marriage, and better your athletic career. It's because it goes back to seed planting. The seeds you plant is what you're going to reap down the road. You sow a good seed, you're going to get a good result. You sow a bad seed, it's going to get you because what you do in the dark comes out in the light. It always does. And so going back to what you asked about what I've learned, and I learned as much from great athletes as I have great coaches. I got a chance to work with David Cutcliffe, who was the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator at Tennessee for Peyton Manning. Great head coach, great man, great family. Got to work for Tommy Bowden, got to work, play and work for Bill Blau, my head coach at Western Carolina. He got me in coaching, gave me my start. And then, all the Harbaugh family coaches were still there when Coach Harbaugh retired. Then David Elson, who went to West Virginia, they flew him back, became the head coach. So worked with Wink Martindale, worked with Willie Taggart, who's the head coach of Oregon and Florida State. Just around some great coaches at those places. Then came back to Clemson. The history of coaches at Clemson. Coach Bowden got let go, then Dabo took over. They got to work under him for 4 years. And then Coach Fowler, Bruce Fowler at Furman, who was the DC at Vanderbilt. Imagine all those teams he had to stop at Vandy. Alabama and Georgia and Ole Miss and Arkansas. All those teams, if you look at it, you had a little bit lesser of an athlete than you did at Alabama, right? I mean, we all know that. It's common sense. And so got to really see the cerebral side of coaching. And I got to see the really humble side of great first round draft picks. And at Clemson, got a chance to see gold medalists, got a chance to see Olympic soccer players, got a chance to see, went to West Kentucky, Courtney Lee played for Orlando Magic, got a chance, he was a first round pick, had a chance to coach him. Aguchi Inoue, who was on the USA Olympic team in soccer. Just phenomenal athletes. I just happened to be there, like a fly on the wall, training these guys, work with these guys. Just great people, great people.
Through all these travels, you kind of stumbled onto the West Side idea, Conjugate in the college setting, accommodating resistance, some of these ideas. How did that play in? How did you end up down that rabbit hole, and how were you able to adapt that to some of the teams you were working with?
Let's go back to Nebraska, Boyd Epley, right? So Boyd Epley, Mike Arthur, and Gary Wade. Gary Wade goes to Detroit Lions, who's their, Boyd Epley's right-hand man. Then comes to Clemson, hires Coach Batson. Coach Batson is his GA at Clemson. And then Coach Batson gets the head strength. He's the first strength coach at Bowling Green State in Ohio. Well, where's Louie Simmons from? Ohio. So Coach Batson, he's a big-time power lifter back in the day. And, he even dabbled in pro wrestling. Coach Batson is, he was there when, I don't remember these names. He said he went to Charlotte one time. They picked him up in a van. And Ole and Arn Anderson took him up there, and Jimmy, the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, took him in the ring. They made him do a bunch of GPP and just beat the crap out of him. He's like, I don't want to do this. And so he goes to Bowling Green State, gets with Louie, learns with Louie, and then goes to South Carolina, University of South Carolina, and then goes to Furman. University of South Carolina asked him to be the head strength coach, but he's from Travelers Rest, so he wanted to go home. So he went to Furman. Well, my strength coach, John Sisk, who played at Western, went there with him. And, that's really where they implemented a lot of their West Side training. And so the dynamic effort, max effort, conjugate, accommodated resistance, all that stuff came naturally from Coach Batson when he went to Ohio, got it from Louie. Well, he brought that to Clemson as well, and I learned it from all them. I used to take, I don't even know if guys do this anymore, grip variations on the bench press. We'd take tape and tape it every 2 fingers. That was a big deal. GAs would change the tape out every 2 weeks. We'd set up for floor presses and weight releasers and chains. We'd adjust the chains all the time. I even built our boxes for us. I'm a carpenter, come from a construction family, so I got a little carpenter skills in me. So I built all of our box squats back in the day that we used to squat off of. And so a lot of those things, come from in the 90s, before everybody was doing that. Coach Batson, he was even in a movie. You remember the West Side movie? Coach Batson's in that movie in there. And so he's been doing that since the early 90s with West Side. And then John Sisk got Louie to come back down at Vandy when I was at West Kentucky. We're only an hour apart. And then Louie came down in Clinton with about 6 or 8 of us down at Vanderbilt for a day, and took us outside. We pulled sleds, we pushed sleds, we pulled sleds, we did sled pulls and sled walks. And then Louie took me and John in the weight room, and he took I never seen this before, and he took a standard barbell and he wrapped bands around the outside of it. He hung kettlebells from it. So that was my first exposure to basically oscillation, a bench press oscillation. And so I'm like, wow, so you really had to stabilize. You had to really lock your shoulders in, your shoulder girdle. And as you descended that board, you had to really engage your lats and lock in. And basically it taught you how to get in that groove and to stay in the groove. And that's what Louie was trying to do, is get those guys in their perfect groove to where their shoulders wouldn't shift back and forth. They could really lock in and shove that bar off their chest. So that's where really the West Side stuff come in. We set up bands. That's all we ever did as GAs, was set up bands and chains and boxes and floor presses. And we used to even have the bench press boxes you used to put beside the bench press that were flush with the bench pad. It's like a floor press, but you'd put it up beside the bench. You'd be on the bench and let your elbows and triceps get parallel with that. Rack lockouts. We were sled pulling and all this stuff. So I don't know if you know this, Coach Batson came up with the original Prowler at Clemson. And so our company, William Strength, we built that back in, I guess, either the late 90s, early 2000s. And the original Prowler is huge. It's heavy. You can barely pick it up. We used to have to load those things in the back of an old truck that we called Bessie at Clemson, an old Dodge truck. And we had to load those big Prowlers around and move them all around fields as we go and do the ultimate conditioning tool there. But it's pretty cool that the Prowler came out of Clemson. The Tsunami Bar came out of Clemson. And have you heard of Tony Villani? He has this new shred mill. Tony Villani's a Clemson guy too. So a lot of cool strength apparatuses came out of Clemson, South Carolina.
You started touching on it, and I have plenty of questions about it, but the Tsunami Bar jumped into your head, and you chased this idea down. What led to the idea that a flexible bar will create so much adaptation?
Well, really, we weren't trying to create a business or anything. It was just basically a guy named Gordon Brown came to me, brought a short little 36-inch stick that had a piece of fiberglass in it. And he brought it to me. It was basically like our multi-stick is now. It's a little short, but you just push and pull, no weight on it. And he's like, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe I can help pass set. Maybe I can warm my shoulders up before I bench press. And then we went back and forth. I said, when I was with Louie, we put, like I mentioned earlier, we put the bands on the bar and we worked on, and it's a form of accommodative resistance, right? And so oscillation, as you descend, bringing the bar down. I said, let's try that. And so we hung kettlebells from it. He made a PVC pipe, actual real PVC, white pipe. He stuck a piece of fiberglass in the end. We went to Ace Hardware and we bought, you ever seen those little plumber screws? They're red. You put them in a pipe for temporary. We put that in the end. And we had Husker collars at the time. You don't see a lot of Husker collars anymore. It's a collar that twists and turns. So we had them on both ends. So that's what locked the weight in. And it kind of formed as the wear pad. Put the weight on it and locked the Husker collar back on the other side. We were hanging kettlebells at first, kind of mimic a bamboo bar, which Louie used a lot of bamboo stuff. And, we took that off. It felt okay. And then we slid a 45 on the outside. I don't know what made us do that, but we did. And Adam Smother and I were benching with it. And I'm like, Adam, feel this. And so as we start pushing it, we'd pull it. And it became kind of like a body blade. Remember the old body blade? As you push, you pull. It was like a bench press trampoline. And I said, Smo, try this. And it's like, oh my gosh. It blew up our lats and our shoulders and our tries and our chest. And then I said, let's see if we can squat with it. So we started squatting with it. I said, let's see if we can clean with it. So we started cleaning. I said, let's try a football gym. So we hung some more. We used to have blast straps that we'd hang from the racks that we'd do, rear delt pulls and all kinds of stuff with it. And so we hung it from that. And we're like, oh my gosh, we got all kinds of stuff we can do. And then me being an O lineman and working with the O line at Clemson, I said, let me see if I can pass set with it. I don't know what made me think of that. We started pass setting with it. And man, just that push pull mimicked when I see all the scouts come in and all the D-line and O-line coaches come in and work on the linemen, they would push them and pull them as they would, test them for those days. And that was a great tool for us to do that. And then Gordon's like, you want to start a business? I'm like, how do we do that? And he's like, well, it's probably going to take about $10,000. Well, being a young strength coach, $10,000 is like $1 million to me, And so I told my wife, I said, hey, we're going to take some money out of the bank. And, when you got 12,000 in the bank and you only got 10, you got to take out. Wife's like, are you sure about this? Or, are you sure about this? I was like, I think we're on to something. And so that's kind of how we got started. And then we actually talked to several companies before we talked to William Strength. They were kind of apprehensive because it was so different. They're all about steel. All these companies were about steel. So I talked to Hammer Strength. I talked to Powerlift and several other companies. And even talked to Rich Gray, who's at Play now. And Rich like, that's a great idea. He said, but nobody's going to want to do it until you develop it. No company wants to take something that's a prototype. They want to see a finished product. So we actually started developing. We're using ABS plastics, different plastics. Gordon, who's now 80 years old, who is a retired captain in the Navy, who was an engineer, went to Clemson. I think he went to Chapel Hill and he went to UNC Charlotte. So, he's also in the Naval Academy. He was like, hey, let me talk to some of my partners that I know in the business. Let's find the perfect combination where this thing won't break. And so we worked on it for a year or so, and then we got the perfect combination, and it's been great ever since. And so that's kind of how the Star Bar came about. It's and now it's all over the world. And never could have dreamed a PVC pipe in a college weight room will be all over the world. But it still stems back to dynamic effort, right? It stems back to it's bands and chains, but bands and chains decelerate as you push up, and the Tsunami Bar accelerates. So therefore, you got to pull it back down. So you get anterior and posterior symmetry as you push and pull. Where the chains and bands, you get accommodated resistance, but you got to really break them apart. You don't get both sides of the training aspect of it like you do with the Tsunami Bar.
What I wondered, I've not used one a lot, so my experience with them is very limited. Just watching some of the videos you put on and watching some other guys do it. How is that affecting reversal strength? It seems like you could create a huge amount of reversal strength through that, which is overall what you want for your alignment anyhow. So how is that affecting that and creating something more than what just bands or a bar would do?
Yeah, that's what I was hitting on. The bands and chains, you are coming down under control, but the reversal strength, if you think about, we've always done board training too, so you sink it in. The reversal strength is the ability to sink that bar into your chest and the ability to shove out. The same way as you sit back on the box squat and you're pulling your hips back. So there's two types of squats. And I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna answer your question. That's gonna feed this into it. So I like a hip hinge back squat, and I like what I call an athletic squat, a Z in the knee. So a Z in the knee, you get more ankle flexion, and a hip hinge, you get more of a cocking of the hip. So you got vertical shin angle. So you got your vertical shin angle. That's if you want to do a really heavy squat and you want to train the hips. But if you want to train more of an athletic movement, ankle mobility and stability is very important too for linemen, for anybody that are playing a sport. And so that reversal strength of sitting back on that box, think about, I would tell guys, think about, instead of going down, think about going back, back, back. Think about a revolver, a pistol. You're pulling back the hammer on it, right? That's the same way your hips are. Think about a bow and arrow. You're pulling back the bow, and that's the way your hips are. You're pulling it back, right? And then you're shoving it. Whichever way your hips go back is where they're going to go forward. But if you go down, you're going to go this way, but you want to go back and then shove those hips through to make it more sport specific. So the Tsunami Bar allows you to do that. It allows you to get to more of an athletic feel. So the reversal strength allows you to have what we call symmetry. The anterior and posterior, instead of segment it and breaking it apart, you can put it actually into a movement pattern like you are when you move. Strength is important, but moving with strength, that's what speed is. Speed is strength in movement, right? So how do we transfer what we do with the steel barbell to the grass, the court, the diamond, the wrestling mat, the pool, or whatever? Well, we've got to have something that's more acclimated to athletic movement. And that's what this allows you to do. It allows you this, if you can get this thing to your body, it can contour and move with your movements and add resistance to your movements. So the actual weight number, the mass number is irrelevant, but the forces that you can produce with the speed and dynamic movement of it is unbelievable. So to help with reversal strength, tremendous amount of reversal strength.
So that may have been the best description of a box squat I have had anybody say when they get on here. I mean, you really broke it down well. I know to help athletes understand that we do the wall squat a lot. And if you're not reaching that butt back towards the back of the box, you'll fall off the wall. So, yes, right. I try to get athletes all the time to think about getting that butt back, 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 back. And then it moves their chest over their knees a little bit better. But it puts them it puts the bar in a really good path. It seems to put it where it needs to be over the quads, hamstrings, and glute in the best way. Where if they sit down too straight, like you said, to me the bar path falls back on their lower back and their glutes aren't able to fire. And then what you see them do is eventually they have to shove the butt back to get it in a better position before they can come up.
it's like a false movement. It's like a
Yes.
false step when you're sprinting, right? So Louie told us when you're making your box, instead of having your box square, you make it square, but you turn it into a diamond. So now you straddle the diamond and you put your calves, you squeeze your calves against the box, and that's going to keep your shins vertical, right? As you sit back. So if you just, as you squeeze it, you're almost doing it like an abductor type squeeze on the box, and now you're taking those hips and you're pushing those hips back, right? And so it gives you a perfect movement for that hip hinge.
We went to setting our box in a diamond shape because it keeps the athlete from getting their calves locked. On a straight box, they get
Right.
stuck. Them calves get stuck against the box and they're not able to get up off there in the correct manner. So, yeah, it seems like if you turn that at a diamond, then you can start telling them to reach their butt back to that back diamond, and then it all makes
Right.
sense. Their calves don't get locked and they can pop up off that.
Yeah, the cue is back, 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 right? So back, 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 not down, 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 back, 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 back. So everybody wants to sit down, but they can just sit in that position and just reach, 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 reach. You know, I tell them to basically, I say, think of a bird dog. Bird dog your chin, set your jaw, and then push and have your butt go the opposite direction and push your butt back. But bird dog your chin and drive your hips back.
The hardest part, I think, to teach, and I worked with Pete Arroyo up in Chicago a lot, and he helped me with some of these ideas, is to pull yourself into the box, like you said, with your hip flexors and your quads, and you're actually pulling yourself into the box so that you're ready to spring off the box.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very difficult concept for athletes to understand, it seems like.
They want to bounce on that box. They want to sit there and they want to tap and go. Well, it's the same idea on the bench press when you're doing a board press. As you're coming down, you want to pull, like you're pulling the bar, almost like, Louis would tell, he's like, you want to wrap that bar around, you want to go below the nipple line at the highest point, but I'm trying to reach even down to my stomach almost. I want to pull, 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 and then I can shove. You can really get your gut into it if you get it pulled down.
I will have to stand there with
Same
athletes.
idea, same principle.
Same principle, and so I'll stand there with athletes on that bench press and physically pull their hands apart all the way down, and then have them reach with their chest to create that tension. Yes, just the same in the box squat. You're creating a spring, and then you're able to pop one, whether it be a bench
Right.
press or a squat. We actually teach a little bit of that in the reverse hyper, which sounds weird, but we will
Mhm.
put them in a reverse hyper, and then instead of letting that weight drag their legs clear under the reverse hyper, we'll have them stop it abruptly. Well, to stop that, you have to use the hip flexors and quad to stop that and then spring out of it. And it's amazing how much you can mimic a squat in a reverse hyper if you're thinking about it that way.
We're trying to figure out more ways to make that reverse hyper with our company, how we can make it more than just a reverse hyper and a glute hand. We got a combo of the two. How can we make it, the ultimate posterior chain in one spot. And so we're working on some things now to do that. Can't give you too much yet because I don't want everybody else to get a hold of it, but
You got to protect your ideas, man.
we do. We do.
The
I don't
one
care. Hey, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got ideas. Everybody's trying to find ways to make things better. We're all pirates anyway. We've all stole all this stuff. I didn't come up with anything. Even Louis, he studied the East Germans and the Soviets and all those guys, and I mean he's brought some of those ideas over here, and so it's all been passed down through the generations. That's how a rich man gets rich. If he's smart, he'll listen to other rich men. Well, a strong guy gets strong because he listens to other strong guys who went through it first.
There's a lot of truth to that, and when we work with sprinters, they listen to the fast kids. They don't listen to the slow kids, they listen to the fast
Uh,
kids.
I know. I know.
The tsunami bar, what I saw when I was talking to with a coach the other day, is where I see a huge benefit is contact prep. I think the oscillation of that bar sets the stage very well that preseason, off season, you can prepare the body for contact prep because that bar is going to oscillate so hard that it allows time to develop those tendons and things like that we're not thinking about that are going to be exposed in a football game. Did you see benefits there with that?
I think that's the thing that people are missing out on is really fascia. Fascia training. muscle attachments, ligaments. A lot of people will focus on developing the muscle, but you got to think about the muscle attachments too. And those things take a lot longer to develop too. And so you can develop this big, huge muscle. And maybe why we're having a lot more injuries now. We're trying to prevent injuries, but we're not. We're trying to quick cook everything. That's what I'm talking about. I don't want to have a microwave effect. I want to have a pot roast effect where you put it in there and let it cook, crock pot. And so, you go back to thinking of time under tension. Well, if you think of time under tension, eccentric, concentric, isometric. Well, now if you think of dynamic and unaccommodated resistance, now you're thinking time under active tension, right? So not just time under tension, but time under active tension. There's a time. So Speed Force Max training, right? We always say there's a time to go fast, there's a time to go hard, there's a time to go heavy. Predominantly, we want to go fast. We want to take a submaximal weight. We want to move it as fast as we can. Well, time to go hard, we want to take basically a percentage of that weight, like linear periodization, let it cook a little bit, right? And then there's times that you want to go heavy. It's got to be few, and it don't need to be a lot. Even when Louie was prepping for competitions, he didn't go heavy until competition day. So strength coaches have to be careful too, not to go heavy too much because you got to line it with your practices. So think about a basketball team, a volleyball team. If it's or a football team, if it's a heavy Tuesday in college football and it's Big Tuesday where you're grinding and hitting, you don't need to lift heavy that day because you're going to overtrain your guys. So you got to look at your practice schedule and base it off that as well. How do I accommodate the coaches, the sport coaches, so that we're in sync with each other? Because if I'm just going to be a bullheaded strength coach and say, hey, I'm going to do it this way, by God, or this is my way or the highway. And I hear that a lot of times. I'm like, guys, you can't think like that. You're there to help. You're there to help get them to game day as fresh, as fast, as explosive, as healthy, as excited as can be, right? So in the off season, we're the prick, right? But in the in season, we got to be the lover a little bit. You got to be that. The coaches in the off season, they're coming in the weight room and they're high fiving and loving the guys. Well, in the in season, we got to be those guys. We got to go high five and love on the guys because you got to have that mental side of it too. A Harbaugh wisdom I'll use that David Elson would always harp on me. He would always say, mental is the physical as three is the one. And when I was a young strength coach, I'd be like, what does that really mean? Well, 3 parts mental, 1 part physical, right? So you need to spend, like Abraham Lincoln, 4 hours or 4 or 6 hours sharpening my axe and 2 hours doing it, right? The physical part of it. You got to sharpen that axe. You got to sharpen that soul. You got to sharpen, that mind. And so you got to work on the master. You got to work on the general. And you also got to work on the army. But you can never spend more time on the army than you do on the master and the general, of making it. So Western Kentucky, the motto of that whole school was the spirit makes the master. So whatever spirit's inside of you is going to be your master, right? And so then how's the master communicate to you? Through the general, which is your mind, right? The master is your soul. The general is your mind. And the army is your body. And so that's the same way an athlete is. You got to really help them develop their spirit. You got to help them develop their soul, which is going to feed into their mind, right? And that's going to tell their bodies what to do. The Army does not tell the general what to do. The general tells the Army what to do. And so that's how you got to approach it in season. But going back to the Tsunami Bar, so I didn't mean to get off. You got me going back coaching again. The Tsunami Bar is a great tool to transfer to the grass. So Mike Armstrong, who has a PhD, works for me as well, 30-year plus coach, played in the SEC, played at South Carolina, big tackle. We talk about doing game day lifts. It needs to be fast, quick, and what we're doing is we're greasing that central nervous system. We talked about doing 33s, 3 sets, 3 reps with about 30 seconds rest. So you're going bench, you're going to set it up, just 3, boom, boom, boom. All right, squat, you're going to squat 3, boom, 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 and you're going to set up a jammer or whatever and do that 3 times. That's about it. You're going to do basically 9 reps. You got 3 sets of 3 reps. You got 9 reps at each exercise, and then you're out. You shouldn't lift no more than about 20 minutes. But that's just greasing the central nervous system. and getting it ready to fire. You got to think about the fascia. Uh, oh my gosh, Bill Parisi. Remember Bill Parisi of Parisi Speed School? He's big on the fascia right now. And so he said they did a study in Australia. The Australians are really coming on strong in strength conditioning. They're really doing a lot of research and whatnot right now. So went to one of his conferences up in New Jersey and spoke at the Parisi Speed School up there on Tsunami Bar. And I was listening to him talk, and he said that they have found that there's 8 times more sensory receptors inside the fascia than there is in the muscle and skin combined right now. So think about that. Think about that fascia gets all bound up. Think about soft tissue injuries and things like that. So, you think about the fascia. I tell my kids, if you've ever been deer hunting or you've ever been rabbit hunting and you pull back the fur on a deer and you see the white stuff holding the muscle in place, well, that's the fascia. That's where the electricity happens. That's where the signal is getting sent to the muscle, telling it what to do. I'm speaking this in layman terms to my kids so they can, I put it on the cookie shelf so they can really understand. Or you think about an orange and you peel back an orange and you see all that white, flesh holding that fruit inside. That's the same idea of fascia. It's like a sock almost around the muscle. And that's that all that electricity runs to that fascia, which is pretty cool. I mean, I wish I knew this stuff when I was an athlete. I look back at it now all these years. So now I'm trying to help my son who's 16. And I mean, he's 16 years old. He benches 300 pounds, squats 300 pounds, and squats 500 pounds. And he broad jumps 9 feet. He's 6'2", 250 pounds. He's explosive. We've trained Tsunami Bar since he was 4 years old. We trained Tsunami Bar up until he went to high school. So before he even put 135 or 225 or 350 on his back, he was training Tsunami, getting prepped how to move fast, how to lift with intent, how to do it safely, hip hinge, vertical shin angle, Z squat angle, how to clean, how to shove a bar off his chest. So I love the Tsunami Bar as being a prehab training tool as well, leading into a more, heavy barbell. And then at the end, using it as a finisher to help you get the idea of transferring it to competition. Mike Gentry, the strength coach, retired from Virginia Tech, legend, was Frank Beamer's strength coach. He's like, man, because I see the aging population need this more than anything because they can't handle a steel barbell. He said, my shoulder's so jacked up, I can't even hold a steel barbell in my hand. He said, but that Tsunami Bar, I can hold it, I can bench it, I can squat it. And so I'm really interested to see how we can help the aging population too. And what do you think, think about stroke patients, people that have the ability, trying to regain their kinesthetic awareness, be able to just reach and grab a cup and put a cup in their hand without it shaking out of their hand. I'm trying to think how I can help people beyond competition. So never thought that way before, but as I approach 50, I'm really thinking that way now.
You mentioned Bill Parisi. His book's back there somewhere. He was on the show, read his book. Unbelievable. He was starting to get into water bags and things like that because of what it did for fascia creation. But in that discussion that you were just talking about, I don't know that the connection's there yet, but I'm starting to make it, is we bought a cheap wobble board, right? Just it's something you stand on, it moves around. I've been having athletes do that and then either sprint afterwards or jump afterwards, or we started plugging it in before our dynamic squat day.
Right.
So 30 seconds, single leg, each leg for multiple sets, and then we go when we squat. And it seems like the transfer over to the dynamic squat is insane after we use that wobble board.
Yeah.
It creates an instability. Where I'm going with that is, have you found that if you would do your warm-up sets with the Tsunami Bar, that it creates an instability in the athletes that they're able to turn around and dynamically squat, jump, run faster because of what it's doing?
Right. Yes. So one of my first guinea pigs was Philip Price at Clemson. He came out of the bowl game, and he had a strained labrum in his shoulder. His shoulder was really messed up, couldn't bench. And then he also had a torn meniscus in his knee. And of course, athletic trainers want to go really slow. And we did go slow. but he was wanting to get ready to go for pro day at Clemson. And so we slowly progressed him, and then we started doing Tsunami Bar. And this, we hadn't even sold one yet. This is just in the very beginning. And we were charting all this stuff to see where Gaines was at. I mean, I remember when we first could do a 225 rep, he did 5 times. That's after his injury. I think the most he ever done before was about 20, 21. And then we slowly progressed him, and then he tested his broad jump, his vertical jump, and it was real baseline. It was really probably, on the lower end of what he normally could do. We slowly progressed him to Tsunami Bar. Almost went strictly Tsunami Bar with that and kettlebells, just because the movement pattern of swinging, the hip hinge, the shoulder mobility. We were using a sub-maximal weight, everything we did. The only thing we did as he progressed, we would load up 225 and see how much he could do. Well, from week 0 to week 8, he went from, 5, I think he ended up doing about 31, 32 reps at 225. Most he ever done before was in the low 20s. So we took him after his injury and got him stronger, using a dynamic effort with Tsunami Bar. Same way with his vertical jump, went higher than when it was before. And, he had a meniscus tear as well. Also, his broad jump had went up, right? And so I'm training with him. I was a 600-pound bencher at the time, raw. And I've done it on 2 different occasions. And I was just training with him. I wasn't training heavy, but I trained Tsunami. And when he would drop and do a 225 drop set, so after we trained Tsunami Dynamic, we'd do a drop set. He would do 225, and I'd do 315. Well, I was hanging with him, so he got in the 30s on 225. I actually PR'd myself and did 315 33 times, but never trained heavy. Just trained Tsunami twice a week and then do a drop set. And I got up to 33. The most I'd ever done was probably in the mid-20s. And Coach Batson, that would be our drop set. We'd do 315, and then we'd do another drop set at 225 after we had trained. So I'd got with 33 times, which for me, that was a lot of weight. I mean, that was a lot of reps of 315. My body weight at the time was probably about 325. So roughly my body weight. I'm definitely not that strong now. I'm getting older, and but man, that was some fun times though. It was fun, and I wish I had Philip on here to tell the story. I mean, this is a big dude. This is a walk-on tight end that came in he's probably 6'7", 300. When he's 325 pounds when he left, he came in. He was a tight end. He's like, I'm a tight end. I'm not a lineman. I'm like, yes, you are. You're a lineman. You just don't know it yet. And so he went through power. He went through 2 cycles of power hour. That's how small he was. So I think he might have been 230 pounds at 6'7". He was a string bean. And but he just developed, man, and really did Tsunami. He's actually the first Tsunami video that I did. He's in it, the very first one. So if I can archive that and find it, that was back in 2012, in the spring of 2012. We sold the first bar at the CSCCA in Kansas City, May of 2012. I think Texas, Missouri, and Tennessee, Chattanooga were the first schools to buy them. And then we kind of went from there. So to answer your question, yes. It's kind of like, you ever done over speed runs and then you go sprint? You ever done, we used to take the bands and we would do dynamic effort with bands, take it off, and then load the bar up. So yeah, it works without Tsunami Bar. It works with just bands and chains. Accommodative resistance will help do that as well.
It seems like that's a huge needle mover. If you can find a way to increase the speed in most athletes, because most athletes aren't twitchy, everything else just comes to meet that, and strength goes up, explosiveness goes up. I think if you're doing that at the right velocities.
You don't want to overtax them though. So I mean, when the CNS is empty, they're not going to be able to lift heavy anymore. So I tell guys, you're going through your ATP, your CP, and your oxidative energy cycles, as you're going through that. So I tell them to think about it. And one's like rocket fuel, one's like gasoline, and one's like diesel fuel. So you always train your fast stuff first because that's your rocket fuel. Once your rocket fuel is burned out, then you go to something hard. Gasoline can handle hard, but only diesel can handle something heavy. So you get into that fat utilization, oxidation. So you can handle heavier loads. It's just hard to apply the speed to it.
when I was studying for all this, there's a few other questions. I know we've been going for a while, and you probably want to get home. You're on Eastern time, so you're even later than it is here. But the a couple other things that aren't Tsunami Bar related, but I heard you talk about that were very interesting is whether they know it or not. Every athlete has a shelf life, and you have to find a way to maximize the potential. Through all the stops you've been at and all the different things you've done, what are some of the most effective ways of maximizing an athlete's potential?
So I'm gonna quote the Bible again. It says, "The grass withers and the flower fades." Right. So in your athletic career, high school career, I told my son this the other day. I told my Iron Disciple group the other day. I said, your athletic career at every stage is like a flower that buds, it blooms, and it goes back in. And then you're going to go to college. It's going to bud, it's going to bloom, it's going to come back in. And if you're fortunate enough to go to the NFL, it's going to bud, and it may be a quick bloom and fall back in. It may be a real quick bloom. And then you're going to have to go decide what you're going to do from your career wise. What am I going to do after that? Well, that thing may take a while to bud out, and then it may bloom 20, 30 years like a coaching career. And then when you get done with that, now what am I going to do after my coaching career? I always tell my, and I'm going to answer your question. I'm just kind of giving this analogy. I've said at some point in time, you're going to hang up the cleats. And then at some point in time, you're going to hang up the whistle. At some point in time, you're going to hang up the LLC or whatever and pass it on to someone else. So to try to help, everybody does have a shelf life, and everybody's shelf life is different. It's really based off genetics too, so we're forgetting the genes that are passed down, what God has given to certain people and families. They're already predisposed to having great potential, athletic potentiation of being great athletes. Being great athletes, though, I see a lot of great athletes that get hurt really quick too. And one comes from not training, and one comes from overtraining or incorrectly training. So I really believe that if we take a Speed Force Max approach, which is really a West Side approach, but in a modern way, time to go fast, time to go hard, time to go heavy, and we know when to do those three things, we can help elongate the shelf life. What's it going to be worth to a guy, Tom Brady, for instance? What's it worth to Tom Brady to try to get another year in? Well, it's a pretty good contract. And so if we can he figured out something to stay in there and do it that long. And so it's harder for linemen to stay longer because they're in the trenches and they're battling. It's hard for running backs because they're getting whacked by these crazy linebackers. And so certain positions can last longer, so it all depends on the position. It depends on genetics. It depends on the health. It depends on how early you started training, So I really think that we're missing a boat if we don't start even in elementary school doing some basic physical development. So, not to get political, I really hope the presidential fitness test would come back to help stimulate training in elementary school. So going from elementary school to middle school, you're missing those windows of opportunity. Have you ever seen the bar graph where it shows when a baby is born, their central nervous system is doing this on a bar graph, but their endocrine system is doing this. But now as they go to get prepubescent, this thing levels off and this takes off. So, but what about all this training here from a dynamic standpoint, central nervous system, learn to have kinesthetic awareness. Baby, he's learning to balance, to run, to jump. Well, what if it can help aid that? And then when that testosterone or estrogen kicks in and they're growing, man, what if we had them prepared at that point? How many windows have we missed and how many injuries have been caused by doing too many sports, too many AAU and travel ball and overuse injuries getting to this point? You ever seen the movie Serena Williams and her sister where he wouldn't let them do his competitions till later? He was training them, right? I think that was smart of their dad to do that. And they played a long time in tennis. So does that make sense what I'm saying? I mean, I think we really need to start as early as we can. Not saying we put a heavy barbell on our kids' back, like I did Tsunami Bar, like the small Tsunami Bar that I had with the 1-inch diameter only weighed like 7 pounds. And so my son was squatting with a 7-pound bar. And then when he got into middle school, I put the bigger bar on his back. We didn't load it up, we just used the bar. And then I put some 10-pound Alicos on the outside. Then we add another 10-pound Alico, and I felt like he could move that better. When I saw his movement patterns move better, then I was slowly progressing. So I think we can improve shelf life, but we gotta keep educating people, because the idea is, we've always heard that weightlifting stunts growth, right? We've always heard that growing up. It's going to stunt your growth. It's going to stunt your growth. Well, there was an article in the New York Times that I was writing a paper on youth training. I did that when I was at Furman, because parents would ask me, when do I start training my kids? I'm like, the day they're coming out of the womb, do something with them, start doing something, some type of resistance, stretching training or whatever. But it said that they studied Japanese sweatshops. Well, they're already genetically smaller people already. And, you know, it was the method, it was the idea of saying that made them smaller. And then that came over to the U.S. with that. I think the Germans actually studied it and said that, but they've proven that wrong. I think it was Feigenbaum out of New Jersey University who wrote that article that I read. But so I grew up on a farm. Okay. I didn't get strong with a tsunami bar or with a barbell until I went to college, really. My grandfather, we got up hay, we split wood, we put up cows. He didn't tell me to jump off the hay wagon or jump out of the barn. Hey, make sure you set your hips back, 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 back. Make sure you land as soft as possible. Don't let your knees get too far over your toes. He's like, get off that trailer and get that done. Go pick up that bag of soybeans and throw it on the trailer. He didn't say bend your legs. He just said go get it. So I was never injured as an athlete. I never had an injury in college, high school, or anything. If I was good enough, I could have kept on playing. I was healthy enough. I was strong enough. I wasn't good enough. And so shelf life too is talent, right? You can't outcoach talent, and you can't give someone talent. You can just help add to their talent. There's a lot of factors that weigh into shelf life. But does that make sense what I'm saying? I'm trying, you got to really, it's a process. It's a slow cook. We're trying to shove training in high school, and it's almost too late. Because when does CNS and your endocrine system kick in? Where they crossroad at? That's when I think it's too late.
And that makes a lot of sense. Really, it honestly does. And you look at athletes generationally ago, they didn't have all the injuries that we have now. Now, maybe they weren't playing all the sports all the time like we were, but we seem to be a more robust society when manual labor was more of the way we did things at a younger age. Yeah. The farm kids
They were prepared then.
Yeah.
They were physically prepared.
Yes, you didn't see a bunch of farm kids, at least that I grew up with, in the hospital with a torn knee, but they were doing harder, heavier work than what we see in a lot of the sports that we play now.
Well, also with the diet too. The diets, we have fast food diets. If you're playing all these sports, where are you eating at? You're eating fast food. You're eating at Chick-fil-A and Wendy's and McDonald's. You're trying to grab something quick, Zaxby's, chicken places. Kids love chicken fingers, so they're living off of chicken fingers. When I grew up, my grandmother and grandfather, they raised their own animals. I was eating organic food, didn't even know it. Grass-fed beef and organic vegetables, canned. My grandmother had a canning house, right? So I get off the bus every day and I go eat my grandma. Then I go home and eat again, because they would eat at 4 in the evening, and mom and dad would eat when they got off work. So I was eating 2 meals a day, 2 suppers a day, I should say.
Speaking of diet, that was kind of in a roundabout way the next question. I'd heard you talk about this, and I thought it made more sense than what we probably want to talk about. But you can't outrun a bad diet, you can't outrun bad players, and you can't outrun bad coaching.
Yeah, you can't out-train those. You know what I'm saying? So, it all starts with what you eat. You got to eat well. It's a real simple way. If you could ball your fist up, you need to tell a kid, and I speak to kids, and it'll translate to adults too, but you need to have a protein the size of your hand, at least. Ball it up, and that's the amount of protein you need at a minimum, right? And so when you're making your plate, you always need a protein, you always need a vegetable, and you always need a carb. I try to make it now we can complex that in a great way. But for a kid, you got to make it as simple as possible. So when you're balling that fist up, think about this. we always would use the tiger paw analogy. This is your protein. This is your hydration, half your body weight in ounces of water a day. So I need to, if I'm going to divide that by 6 meals, how much water do I need at that meal? So whatever you weigh, if you weigh 200 pounds, you need 100 ounces of water. Well, in that meal, how much water do I need right there? And then I want a vegetable. And I would always tell them I need to find a healthy fat. If I can find a healthy fat to add into my diet. And then I want to have a complex carbohydrate where I can have fuel throughout the day. And if you want a little bit of sugar or whatever, you can have a little bit of sugar, for a quick glycogen deposit, quick burst when you want to go to work. So you need one that lasts longer. You need one to give you a little burst, but it needs to be balanced. So think about a paw, when you're making your diet. You just got to, if you try to give them this manual, you think, all right, follow this manual right here. Follow this manual. They're going to look at this manual. You know how many manuals I've made in college? You know what they do when they get in their car? They throw it in the back seat of the car and they never look at it. So you got to basically give them simple nuggets that they can just take and run with. Of course, we want to add in creatine, L-glutamine, omega 3s, multivitamins. Just some basic things they may be missing in their standard diet that they're eating every day. But that's your baseline. Your diet is your baseline. Can't out-train a bad diet. You can't out-train bad recruiting. You can't out-train bad talent. And you definitely can't out-train bad coaching, right? So a lot of coaches that have made strength coaches look really good. A lot of players and coaches at a lot of big-time schools have made strength coaches. I'm not knocking the strength coaches, but I know some really good strength coaches who are with, good players and good coaches. They're just not as good as some of the other ones, So people try to associate that a strength coach is this or that based off wins and losses. I like to look at their injury report too. Let me see your injury report. Let me see your developmental. How have you developed a guy, and what does that guy think about you? You can make a kid do anything if he trusts you and believes in you. There's 1,000 ways to train. There's no perfect way to train. So what we're talking about today is just one way. It's not the only way. It's just the way that's worked with us. Worked for us, and that we've seen a lot of success. But there's other ways to get it done too.
I'll hit you with this last one because I think it stuck out to me when I was studying this, and I don't think we teach kids this soon enough. And there's a harsh reality that comes with figuring it out. You've seen a lot of talent. You've been in a lot of places. Those kids come in, they've been courted by these coaches, they've been courted by these programs, they've been told, we got to have you to win, we got to have you to succeed. The athlete at some point has to learn how to be de-recruited and almost go the other way. They have to start being the recruiter of the coaches so that they can start getting time on the field. How can we start getting athletes prepared for that stage sooner than later?
Well, just teaching them that everybody does have a shelf life, teaching them like, hey, when the lights go off, nobody cares about you anymore. So understand while the lights are on, enjoy that time. Because when the lights go off in the stadium and they can't use you anymore, they're not going to let you hang around the facility anymore. They're on to the next guy. You got a small window of when you're blooming, and then you got to understand when that flower is fully out, it's going to die pretty quick. So your career is getting close to being over. And so when they're coming in young like that, they're in a little bloom, right? They're in a little bloom. They're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and cocky and arrogant and all that, and everybody's telling them how good they are. But when you get around a bunch of those guys too, that's humbling in itself. You could be a 5-star, but there could be a 3-star there or even a 2-star and come knock you off your high horse. The weight room does not discriminate against anybody. When you get in that squat rack, hey, it's not, I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care if you're a Christian or non-Christian or whatever. It does not discriminate. It's going to pain you. You're going to have to go down and go up just like everybody else. And when you go and sprint, you're going to have to sprint down the field like everybody else. There's not enough money to buy and get out of that. There's not enough fluff to get out of that. So the weight room is a great equalizer. Basically, it's a humbler. And nobody, if you're a great competitor, nobody wants to be humbled. Nobody wants to be like shown up. So when you come into a high competitive area, those stars fall off. Those stars are going to start falling off their head. And then they got to decide, do I really want to do this? Because a lot of guys like to be recruited and like to be fluffed and like to be loved on, told how good they are. But when it's time to pay up with what you've been told, that's a different story, you know. And so I've seen a lot of great ones, but the great ones come in and they embrace it. The good ones they know they're good, you know, they know they're good and they're confident in themselves. We want them to be that way. It's easier to say whoa than go, right? I mean, if you got a guy that doesn't want to go, old Seabiscuit, we call them swamp donkeys, you know, if you got to sit there and just whip him to go, you don't want that. I'd rather have a guy who's a wildcat, and I gotta bring him in, right? You bring him in by building rapport with him, and when you build rapport with him, he starts trusting you, starts believing what you're telling him, and then you got him. When you got him by his heart, you got him. He'll listen to everything you say. If you say something kind of crazy like, "Coach, you sure about that?" You're like, "Yeah, man, I'm just messing with you." And you know, how does a player know you love him? Well, we spell love Time, time. So by being in the weight room, they spend a lot of time with you. Those position coaches, they only get them in the season in the spring ball. But as a strength coach, you're with them all year round. And then that love is spelled Time, and they know who loves them.
Coach, this time has been amazing. I'm glad we were able to sit down and do this. Uh, the work that you've done in the Tsunami Bar, all the videos I've watched of it, it's an amazing, game-changing tool that's affecting weight rooms from young athletes clear up to, like you said, an older population. So that you would take some time, talk about your product, talk about your faith, talk about different stops you've been in, it means the world to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We can keep talking if you want to. I love this stuff.
If you're good, we'll go a little bit longer, man.
I just, yeah, I don't want to take up your time.
No. I always clear my schedule. I'm just always afraid that I'm going to keep somebody too long and then they're going to hate it. But if you're digging it, we'll keep going here a little bit longer. And because there are some other questions I had here that were really interesting to me that I heard you talk about. So,
well, I mean, I got time. I mean, I'll make time. I mean, this is what God has given me to give back to the world. So, who am I to cut you off? Let's. If you got more questions, I'll answer.
well, let's go. Uh, I thought about this, and this compares to horses, and obviously behind me you could see all the horse stuff we talked about a little bit of pre-show. But there's a fine tuning in everything we do. There's a fine tuning in horsemanship. There's a fine tuning in coaching. Um, you can read all of the books. You can read all the study manuals. You can work with everybody you want to work with, but that doesn't mean you've developed the feel to be the guy. Taking the ideas of coaching and turning it into an artesian event almost. How are young coaches able to grow into that and learn that, hey, this is way more art than it is textbook?
Well, it is art, man. It is art. You know, you just got to get around some guys, and you got to learn to get the coach's eye. So that's something the textbook cannot train is a coach's eye. The coach's eye, like we talked about, knowing when to go fast, knowing when to go hard, knowing when to go heavy, know when to press the gas, hit the clutch, hit the brakes. You got to know your athletes. So that goes back to what we talked about, time under tension. You know, a strength coach is 5 to 9. It's not 9 to 5. So when you get up at 4:30 in the morning, you know, and you learn to love something. Now I told you how you spell love, Time. You put time in it, right? So you get time. So time under the, you know, old lifters always talk about time under the bar. Have you had time under the bar? And young coaches need to spend time under the bar. They didn't know what it feels like. And so when you go to prescribe an exercise and give it to a kid, you need to know what that feels like. If you tell a kid to go run 110s or do sprints, you know what that feels like. As an athlete and a coach, I mean, I've been under heavy weight. I mean, John Simpson was my strength coach. We'd go squat, then we'd go run 110s. You know, so you need to feel the pain of it. You need to feel the grind. You know, it's hard to tell a kid. I think the best coaches are the ones that have played. You don't have to always, but you need to have a feel of it, right? You need a feel of competition. And so just because you think it's cool to be a strength coach, you need to have, whether you're a wrestler, a baseball player, a volleyball player, football player, basketball, it doesn't matter. You need to have felt that competition. And you need to feel what it feels like to be sore the next day after being in competition. And so sometimes I think young coaches lose that. They're trying to copy what everybody's doing. I think you got to find something that you really believe in that's really helped you, and then build off of that and run with that, right? So I mean, what got me stronger on the bench and squat was dynamic effort, conjugate, accommodative resistance, and max effort, right? Speed force max. That's what got me stronger. So those coaches, and you need to find you a good mentor. Get you a good mentor. Man, I was so lucky. I had Joey Batson. I had Ruben Mendoza, who was at Notre Dame and Ole Miss. I had John Sisk, who was my strength coach. And then I had guys on the outside. There's a guy up in North Carolina who was the head strength coach for the Charlotte Hornets, Chip Sigmund. He's a great man. I love talking to him. Mike Gentry at Virginia Tech. I love talking to Coach Gentry. Kevin Yoxel, who was at Auburn and other places. I love talking to Coach Yox. Jeff Madden, Mad Dog, who was at Texas and North Carolina. I love talking to Coach Mad Dog. There's probably a lot of guys that I'm leaving out. I don't need to, but I just think of those guys that I would just reach out and talk to, just to be encouraged and to see what they went through and how they got to where they were. You know, those guys were legend in our field. You know, they did it 30, 40 years. And Coach Wade, who was with Boyd Epley back in the day, that's where our power programs came from. It was from the old Nebraska power programs. And you'll find those things still laying around in Clemson weight rooms, in closets and whatnot. But just talking to Coach Wade, he's in facilities now. He's out of strength conditioning. But I would always bring Coach Wade in when my guys would train in the West End Zone, Clemson football weight room. Coach Wade would come in, and he'd have keys on his hips and stuff. He'd be the facilities guy. He's the AD of facilities. And I'd be like, Coach Wade, come over here. I want the guys to know you. You know, like, guys, we're not here without Coach Wade. Coach Wade got Coach Batson here. He's the godfather at Clemson. He's the one that brought all of us here. So we got to make sure, and I think that's where young guys, they don't recognize it early enough that people help them. You know, they think they get it on their own, but everybody has had help. We've all had help. Everything that I've ever accomplished, I've had help, right? From my parents to my high school coaches to my college coaches to my mentors in coaching to even now, like my business mentors, Mike Ramsey and Scott Williams and Gordon Brown. Those guys are my business mentors. I'm not where I am in business without those guys right now. And so just find you a good mentor. Here's a good analogy right here. And I always go back to the Bible. A pastor who played football at Clemson, Ken Lewis, told me, he said, every man needs a Paul in his life and a Timothy. So Paul is the mentor, Timothy's the mentee, right? So if you're a Paul or a Timothy, you need to always be looking for another Timothy if you are a Paul, but you need to have your own Paul too that can pour into you. Don't think that you're a lake. You read all these books, you're a lake of knowledge. It's a river. It's always changing. It's always evolving. It's always moving. It's always fluid, right? The things we're talking about now in 20 years are like, that was good. They had an idea. They had an idea what they were doing. But look at what we've developed now off of their ideas. So Coach Mendoza would always say, hey, we're trying to make this better for the next guy. We're always trying to prepare our athletes because in college coaching, you can get fired anytime. So you're trying to make your facilities and your athletes and the program better. So the next guy comes in, he has catapulted off of you. If you come in and you try to sabotage a program to make it hard for the next guy, then that's not the right thing to do. So the pioneers always had to put all the work in, but the settlers always seem to benefit. And that's the way young kids are. They think that they started on third base, where all the pioneers had to get to first base and the second base, then the third base. But on these young bucks, they think that, they're on home plate trying to get to first base. They're already on third base. They can use all the wealth of knowledge, or they can just run home. And so just being aware, being humble, be eager to learn, don't think you know it all. When I was 28, 29, I thought I knew it all. I'd learned a lot. Learned a lot from Coach Batson and West Side. I mean, I watched all the old VHS tapes of Louie that he made. And I thought I knew it all, but I mean, I'm still learning. I'll be 50 in January, and I feel like some days I don't know anything, you know. But if you're a lifelong learner, you'll always be progressing forward. If you think you know it all, that's when you stop.
You kind of touched on it in there, and I see it all the time. I'm guilty of it, but every generation thinks they had the answers. Every generation thinks their music was better, their movies was better, they got raised better. Overcoming that idea that, you know, like you said, you figured something out. How were you able to kind of get out of that mindset then that you were in?
I guess this time makes you look back, and time humbles you, So the seasons of life come and go, and so you think things are going to last forever. You think you're going to be at Clemson forever. You think you're going to be at Ole Miss forever. You think you're going to be, in high school forever. But it's all going to come to an end. Again, like I said, So as those seasons come and those seasons go, it humbles you, and then it creates inside of you an attitude of gratitude. You're like, God, man, thank you for that time. Thank you for the time that I got to spend as a graduate assistant at Clemson. 22, 23 years old, having a time of my life. I wasn't married, didn't have any kids, didn't have a care in the world, didn't have any money, but man, I was living like a rock star. I just loved it. We'd get up at 4:30 and we'd stay in the waiting room at 10 o'clock at night. Of course, when you get married, you got kids, you can't do that. Uh, but I think the seasons of life teach you. And so every peak and every peak is an enjoyment, but every valley teaches you. So if you can really, when you get into that valley of life, there's things in that valley that are going to teach you that the peak would never teach you, right? So a lot like I got a guy that works for me now, Chad Smith. So when we were at Clemson, and Coach Bowden got fired, Coach Sweeney took over. Chad came in like at Clemson around 2014 to 2018 era. He went through two national championships, right? And I told him, like, see, I was a pioneer, you were a settler. You guys thought you had all the answers, you won national championships. I said, think about, Nuke Hopkins and Taj Boyd and Sammy Watkins and all the great linemen, all the guys that helped CJ Spiller and all those guys that helped build this place so you guys can enjoy it. And so he's like, you're right. And so you don't think about those things till you get older. It's like you don't appreciate your parents until you get older. And so as they go through the seasons of life, they'll look back and they'll appreciate it too. It's just hard. It's hard when it's right there in front of you. You can't see it.
There's a price. You talked about it in there, getting up early, being in the weight room all day, getting the time under the bar, get all the things that go into being a winner. But at the end of the day, there is a price to be the best. And sometimes that price is very high. So
Yes.
learning to not necessarily balance that in your life, but prioritize it. How have you been able to do that?
Well, it's been hard. I got out of coaching, got into business because I wanted to spend more time with my kids. I was able to spend a few years with my daughter before she went to college, and I'm able to watch my son play high school football now, which is the greatest thing in the world for me. I look so forward to Friday nights to go watch him play. My daughter's in a sorority at Coastal Carolina, and next weekend she's in an AD Pi sorority, and they have Parents Weekend. So we go to a dance and all that. Uh, just enjoy spending time with them and my wife and I just being a part of it right now. Where before, when I was coaching, like I said, I get up early, I kiss them while they were asleep, and I kiss them while they were asleep when I came back home. That's a tough life. And then you start thinking, man, and time goes on. That's what young coaches don't understand until they get married. Then their wives are asking, when are you going to be home? When are you coming home? When can we take a vacation? You're like, man, I'm on this football train or I'm on this sport train, basketball train. I don't know when I can take a vacation. They kind of tell me when I can take a vacation. That's hard. And so when you're coaching, it doesn't matter what level you coach at. It doesn't matter if you're in the ACC or SEC or if you're in the Southern Conference where Furman was at. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. It takes what it takes. There's a price to be paid. And when you're in business, there's a price to be paid too. I mean, it doesn't change. It doesn't change in the real world. You got to go out and you got to earn it. And you got to do things that most people aren't willing to do. Everybody wants to have a business. Everybody wants to be a starter. Everybody wants to have rings and championships. but not everybody's willing to pay the price, right? And only the few ones that figure that out, that pay that price, are the ones that get to actually enjoy those times, those high moments. There's two pains in life. There's the pain of discipline, and there's the pain of regret. And so that discipline is all about preparation, hard work. If you can just take discipline and hard work and high character, it'll take you a long way. Talent will take you a long way if you have those things that go with it. You see in a lot of weight rooms, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And so I've always had a walk-on mentality. I grew up as a farmer. Then I was an offensive lineman. I've always been serving people. As a farmer, we serve people. As an offensive lineman, I've served the skill guys. As a strength coach, I serve the coaches and the players. And now in business, you take that same mindset. It's all about, I tell my guys all the time, it's all about relationships. It's all about serving people. They're like, what separates us as an equipment company from other companies? Well, it's our relationships. It's our service. That's what we try to differentiate. We're going to be there before and after. We want to come and do clinics. We want to come do podcasts. We're passionate about this. We're passionate about helping people. We're all coaches. We're all former coaches. All my salesmen are former coaches, and they'll look at other things that people want in their weight room, like, why would they want that? Like, well, you're a coach. Help inform them on that thing. Why would they want that? Could they find something better that they could, get a better engineering value out of in their weight room if they're going to spend a large amount of money? Hope I'm not rambling. I'm just, it shows you how it progresses through life. It starts, if you want to go to college, you got to pay the price. If you want to go to the professional league, you got to pay the price. Those pros make a lot of money, but man, they pay a toll too. Their body gets beat up, they get criticized, and so they earn that money, and it doesn't last very long. NFL, not for long, right? It doesn't last very long. If you made it past 3 years, you made it. So you really made it if you made it past 3 years. It's hard because you got young guys coming up. You think you graduate, you're 23 years old, 22, 23. Now you're 26, 27. You got a young buck coming in at 24. He's ready to take your job. So it gets hard. It gets real hard. Business is the same way. Everybody wants to knock you off. You start growing and people see it. They get, they try to find ways to knock you off.
You touched on it earlier on, and I didn't capitalize when you were talking about it, so we'll come back around to it. But every sport requires a certain body system, a body fuel, some crossover, but a lot of times we get out of the body system that the sport requires and we start training a total different body system. So making sure that you're hitting the qualities that the sport demands and you're getting that programmed in an appropriate amount of time. When did that start coming on that, hey, we need to focus on this body system because it's what carrying us through the sport, as opposed to running, conditioning, maybe something that we may need a little bit of, but that's not our focus? When did the body system idea really take hold?
When I GA'd at Clemson back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Coach Batson brought a guy, John Davies. He was a speed guy out of California. He'd worked with a lot of pro teams. The Argentine national team was really good at soccer at the time, and he'd done a lot of different types of training. He had two types of training he talked about. GPP, which is general physical preparation. So I think as an athlete, everybody needs a general physical prep. I think general physical prep can cover every sport, every athlete. The ability to bend, the ability to jump, the ability to move, right? A little bit of stamina. You need to have a little bit of stamina before you start moving forward. And then you get into more of an SPP mindset, which is specific physical preparation. Some people call it sport physical preparation, right? Or even position specific preparation. Well, I think you look at the energy systems, you look at the demands of the sport, and you try to mimic those things as much as possible in the dark before you put them in the light. And then I think it's a sport coach's job to prepare them from a skill perspective. It's not our job as strength coaches to prepare their skill. That's why the position coach and the head coach get paid what they get paid to develop the skill, to go recruit the talent, to go find the talent, and then it's our job to take that talent and improve their physical capabilities, their longevity, their endurance, their ability to move in space, their toughness. Some call it conditioning. Conditioning is kind of a broad, generic term that kind of sounds negative, but really conditioning is just preparation. It's just preparation to handle tough bouts over and over and over again. So is it more important to have absolute strength, or is it more important to have strength that where you can use over and over and over again? Don't want to be a 100% one rep guy. Well, maybe if I'm a shot putter or a discus thrower, or maybe if I'm a closer when I want to come in and pitch. But if I got to be a guy that I got to be able to do this over and over. An offensive lineman, he's got to be able to take 80 to 90 snaps and battle, hit somebody every single time and handle those blows. He's got to be able to have reversal strength. He's got to be able to move backwards as good as he does forward, right? So, again, I'm favor offensive lineman because I was one, but you're taking a guy who's less athletic than a linebacker and a defensive end and a defensive tackle, and you're asking him to be strong enough to push him forward, but also be fast enough, athletic enough to keep him getting to the quarterback. That's a lot of skill. That's a lot of things you can't train in the weight room. You can help prepare it and have a foundation, but there's a lot of skill involved to be able to do that. Did I hit on that like you wanted?
That was some of it. What I was also thinking was, you got your ATP PC, you have your glycol system, and then you have your aerobic system. And I think sometimes we forsake one for the other. Coaches are high volume people, and while you have a sport that's ATP PC touching on glycolysis, we want to push the aerobic. We want to push the oxidative system. So balancing that, understanding that, and working in the time frames that those require with the rest periods those require.
Because I think we think about hypertrophic development. I think we think about how does the athlete look versus how they perform. We gauge a lot of it off their muscular enhancement than we do off their athletic ability or what they needed to transfer to their sport. So we're always taking before and after pictures. That doesn't always tell the story. It's good if you're bodybuilding, and there's a piece of that. Certain sports need insulation, need more muscle mass. And some sports, you get too much muscle mass, it inhibits their ability to move. Think about golf. Those guys can't get too muscle bound. They got to stay limber and move. But man, a golfer is a powerful. For the size, those dudes are powerful. If he can drive a ball 300 plus yards, I'm a big dude. It's hard for me to drive it over 300 yards. I just don't have the club speed to hit that thing like they do. I can hit it 300 yards, but I see a small guy that weighs 180 pounds. He can smoke it 320, 330, 340. I'm like, how in the world does he do that? Even a small baseball player, he can smoke it out of the park. You look at him, he's 175 pounds.
All right, for real this time, we've been through all the questions. I appreciate it. So I'll hit you with this one, and I often think about it, and I heard you talk about it. So is the technology that we're starting to use today, is that speeding up the process or is it hindering the process?
Yeah, that's a touchy subject. I got a lot of friends that sell this stuff, and I think, and I talked about this earlier, the coach's eye. So when Louie used to teach us how to do dynamic effort on a bench press, we take a stopwatch, and you wanted to take your submaximal weight of 40% or less of your bench press or your squat, and you wanted to complete that lift within 3 seconds. So you take a stopwatch, 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. If your bench was slower than that, you need to take some of the weight off, right? It's pretty common sense. And so now we've got these different devices. Tendo was kind of leading the way for a long time, and now they got all these different devices they put on a bar that can tell you, meters per second, bar speed, force. They'll tell you everything. I think those are cool. I'd like to have one. I'd like to have an accelerometer on Tsunami Bar to actually tell you the oscillation of the bar, the peak of the bar and the trough of the bar when it moves in its wave. Because as an athlete learns to stabilize more, if we can increase those, and he has the same amount of weight over time, I can see how much stronger and how he's able to brace And you talked about reversal strength. I can see how much ability has his reversal strength increased, right? By looking at the oscillations of the bar. So amplitude, the bar is going up and down, but oscillation is going a circular pattern. So the more stable he is, the more ability he's going to have a circular pattern. So I think having a dashboard is good because it makes them competitive. So if they see that, it's going to make them push even harder. But if they're truly, a coach, I think I equate it to a calculator now for young kids, where the older population could do math and divide and multiplication on a piece of paper. Where now none of us can multiply or add or do anything without our cell phone going on our calculator, right? So I think now these strength coaches are relying on it so much. It can help them, but they don't need to solely depend on it because the coach's eye tells you everything. Even the catapult and the connect sign and all those things on the field that tells them load and volume and all GPS and all that. Those things are great, but and you can use that data to make good decisions. That's why it's there. It's there to help you make good decisions, right? But I don't think you need to solely. What about the human effect behind it all, right? What about if we shut them down too much? What about the tenacity, the little intangibles that you're missing out on? Does that make sense? What I'm saying
Yes,
there?
yeah, what it does, because sometimes we can cut things just a little bit short, and we can miss some big benefits,
Yeah.
just because we weren't able to see it for what it was.
Money in the bank, right? I always tell kids we're putting money in the bank. So every little nugget that you have. So when you're doing a rep and that first, second, and third rep, and like, all right, you got one more in you. Let's put some money in the bank right here. Well, if I was using a speed device or a catapult system, it's like, all right, whoa, your CNS is full. You can't do any more. All right. Well, what do we miss out on right there? If we know it's not going to hurt the kid, that's where the coach's eye comes from. The coach's eye, his feel. A coach is, like you said earlier, it's an art, and so the technology keeps it in a science realm, but you're missing out on the human feel. AI is good, like AI and Chat GPT. When you want some information quick, it's good, but at the same time, you don't get wisdom from that. Wisdom happens through the process. So sometimes we're cheating the process by trying to use all this technology. I'm not against technology. I like it, but it's got to have its place.
There's a personal development that has to happen for that
Yeah,
technology to make more sense. I get that for sure.
yeah, it's good. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, it's good. It's just it doesn't always tell the story, though. You know,
And the game doesn't care.
no, I know it doesn't. It
Saturdays don't
doesn't.
care what your CNS is feeling
No,
like in late in the fourth quarter.
yeah,
Hopefully you prepared it right, but there is no VBT or anything like that to shut it down. You just got to
right,
push through.
right. Do you use much devices at all? Do you use anything?
I use OVR for jumps, ground contact times, and I have a velocity, uh, OVR velocity, and I use it on dynamic days. So, but we do it in a Bondarchuk system, and I know I've talked about it before, so people listening are probably like, yeah, we've heard it. But we'll find the weight we like. So I want to find the weight. Let's take the squat, for example, that they can move at 0.6 meters per second.
Right.
We will stay at that weight until they are moving it at 0.885 meters per second.
Mm-hmm.
Then we will drag it back down to zero point 0.6 with accommodating resistance. And then we will work it back up again and wave it that way so that they can work through the whole strength curve. And it seems like that appropriate weight and that appropriate speed has made some of the biggest gains we have seen since we started the gym. I don't know what, and then given the time to work through that, we used to wave a little bit more like West Side, and every week we would do it a little different. And once we kind of stuck with this idea, I like it. So yes, we're looking at the velocity to kind of set the pace, set the bottom, and then we'll watch it clear up to the ceiling. But if it's a little slow one day, we're not taking weight off. We may limit the sets, but we don't want to go down and wait if we can help it. So let's say we were programming, if we wanted 10 sets of 3 on the squat and it's just not there today, we may back that off to 8 sets. And then when we see it dip really down where that speed starts getting into a more of a maximal strength, then we're like, okay, yeah, you're getting enough work at practice or whatever that we'll back the sets off. But we try not to come off the weight if we can help it.
Well, I think it could help you pinpoint and really dial in. It's kind of like a scope, help you really dial that scope in when you're training. I do see benefits to it, but it's not the all be all. It's a guide there to help you. It's help you make good decisions. It's not the final decision. You got to make that on your own. The art of coaching.
That's exactly right. And sometimes being a little slower may not hurt. It depends where you're at in the season. So yes, you have to make those coaching decisions. Hey, we're a long ways out from season. It's a little slow today, but that's okay. We'll get it the next week. We'll go ahead and push through this workout, and then we'll conquer it. We'll see what your recovery is, and then we'll go from there.
Yep. Good deal. What else you got?
Man, I think you worked through all my questions and even a bunch of them that I added on and threw at you anyhow. A lot of them you answered without me asking. So
okay.
I was trying to keep track of the things that you were answering so that I wouldn't double ask it. And I'll tell you what, this was a lot of fun. You tied in outside influences very well with strength and conditioning, and I hope people that listen have as much fun listening as I did asking the questions and then listening to you answer them.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I enjoyed it. I love talking shop, man. I always love talking shop.
I do too. I never thought I would enjoy this podcast as much as I have, and to get the different perspectives, I think it's created a maturity in me that nothing else probably would have. Because you get to see so many ideas, and then you get to see how or listen to how those ideas became to be what they are, or then you can look back after talking to so many different coaches and studying up and say, okay, that's a modification of this system and that system. I see where he come up with this at. It's a really unique perspective.
Cool, man. Good. Well, thank you for your time, and I'd love to come back sometime if you want me.
There's enough information out there and you have enough knowledge, that would be a blast.
Good deal. Well, thank you, and you have a great night.
You do the same. Hey, Voodoo Power listeners. Thanks for watching and spending a little time listening to the coaches that we present on here. The channel has been growing because of community, and I really appreciate you being part of it. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button, leave a comment to let me know your thoughts, and share it with someone who might enjoy it. Those small things make a big difference in helping the channel reach more athletes and coaches. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next video. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.